Well, we got a minute. I'm gonna buy that truck I've been wanting.
Wait, don't you need like weeks to shop for a car?
I don't. Carvana makes it super convenient to find exactly what I want.
Hold up. You're buying a car on your phone? Isn't that more of a laptop thing?
You can shop wherever you want.
I like to do my research, read reviews, compare models. Plus, Carvana has thousands of options. How'd you decide on that truck?
Because I like it.
Oh, that is a great reason.
Go to Carvana.com to sell your car the convenient way.
Warning, do not listen to this show backwards next to an Ouija board.
You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Archaeological Fantasies Podcast, episode 85, and MonsterTalk crossover number 2. I'm your host, Sarah Head, and I'm joined today with Ken Fader, Jeb Card, Blake Smith, and Karen Stollznow. Today we're talking about haunted objects. Is that creepy clown doll in the corner trying to kill you? Can you 3D print your own cursed object? And if you were so possessed, where could you purchase a few of these cursed and haunted objects online? We revisit a few favorites that we've talked about on both podcasts on our super spooky crossover episode of Archie Fantasies and Monster Talk. Get ready to think critically.
Are you getting it? Maybe? Digging in a trench, monuments. Going to the pub.
Welcome to Monster Talk, the science show about monsters. Tonight we're actually joining for another Archaeological Fantasies podcast crossover.
Mm-hmm.
So we've
got...
First one was so popular.
And this is going to be a special Halloween spooky edition.
All the spooky.
Yeah.
Spectacular.
So there's a lot of spooky archaeological topics, and we're going to probably hit on quite a few. We've got myself and Karen, and Sarah and Ken and Jeb from Archaeological Fantasies, which is Archie Fantasies. If you have not subscribed, you are a loser. Subscribe as quickly as you can.
I concur with that.
We also have a
absolutely.
Patreon, so you could give us money if you really wanted to. If you really loved us, you would give us money.
Do all the Patreon.
Do all the Patreon.
You should give us money and worship us. Yes.
Oh, I like that. Yes.
Yeah.
We're off to
Yes.
a good start.
I didn't know what Patreon was, so I asked, and Blake told me it's kind of like a tip jar. So
Kinda, sort of.
It is, yeah.
Basically.
But I told Blake and Karen that I've decided that I'm going to put a tip jar at the front of my classrooms,
Oh,
and
you
with students, if
should.
I've done a really good job lecturing, they should put a couple of bucks in. Why not?
I'm going to do that too. I think it's a brilliant idea.
I think that's great.
Spend time.
I think you've just transformed academia. Is what you just said.
Well, the thing is, I just had to fill out an ethics form, so that might not run afoul. But if you want to support Ken, the best way to support Ken at this point would be to buy his 50 sites you have to see before you die in America book.
Damn right.
Right.
Damn right. In fact, buy a couple of copies. They make wonderful presents for Halloween, for example.
Halloween.
Or
Absolutely.
Christmas,
Ken,
or Guy
what
Fawkes
is,
Day.
in all seriousness, I probably mangled it. Ken, what is the title of that?
Oh, you know what? Shit, man.
It's 50 sites of graves.
My problem with the title was I wanted it to be an archaeological odyssey, and the publisher told me nobody knows what odyssey means.
Oh,
Yeah.
So
no.
it's ancient America, 50 archaeological sites to see for yourself.
All right. Excellent. So we are doing our second crossover. Our first one was on the very serious and important topic of fairies.
Yes.
It's a great episode. In all seriousness, it gets into how people see the past, how they sort of imagine human agency in extra human places and so on. But we decided this time we're going to go all out and go with haunted objects, because you're surrounded by objects and they might be haunted. Try to go to sleep now. So
It's a serious matter.
It's a very
it is a serious
matter.
Well,
It is
and
actually-
listen. In Connecticut, we have the Ed and Lorraine Warren have their own museum.
Oh God! Oh God!
Yes, they have a museum, and in that museum is I guess it's a Raggedy Ann doll.
You're talking about the real Annabelle.
The real Annabelle,
Which is supposed
yes.
to be.
But it's a Raggedy Ann doll.
No,
Okay.
I've never seen it. But
I was going to ask you if you've been there, Ken. In all
I
seriousness,
have not. Well, the thing is, I guess when I think it's Ed who died.
He did.
Yes, Lorraine
That's
did.
correct.
Ed
That's
died. And I guess there was, like, for a few bucks they gave tours of it, but now they've kind of closed it down, and the only people they let in, they do these dinners that cost a tremendous amount of money, but it's a much smaller crowd. So their business model has changed tremendously. And I'm not about to pay them a whole shit ton of money for like rubber chicken and to be
well now let's
around.
also be fair. I mean, Robert the Doll was the big one, and for that you need Spooky Piano, which I'm not saying that that's a prime matter to discuss or anything, but I am.
Right. But I think in the case of Annabelle, when it was open and they let people in, they warned people. They didn't want people to look at it because you would automatically get haunted or something. Oh, the spirit would travel. Oh, yeah, exactly. But so it's the kind of thing. It was the thing that drew people in, but then they made a big deal about, oh, don't look at it. But
are we still talking about Annabelle or Robert?
Well, they're
either.
Or the Warrens.
Because the Robert doll I just heard a whole story about the Robert doll on an excellent podcast called "And That's Why We Drink," and that doll sounds creepy as hell.
Obviously.
I think Jeb, you would actually really like that show. It's half paranormal, half true crime, but yeah, they covered the Robert doll, and the story for that is.
We did the show too.
Yeah, ours is in our top 10 downloaded, like most.
Is that in your top 10?
Yeah, we interviewed the curator from the museum there.
Right.
See, they were talking about all kinds of crazy stuff at the. So, like, is it true that like you have to ask permission of the doll to take its picture?
Yes, and then if you don't, you need to write a letter in apology.
Right. That's absolutely true folklore. Yeah.
Well, obviously.
Here's the deal. Ed and Lorraine used to do tours, and they would lecture at universities, and they came to my university. So I primed one of my students to ask them about the James Randi Challenge. Now, this is back in the day when it wasn't $1 million, but I said, go ask them why they've never, have never accepted the challenge. And Ed said, I remember it very clearly, that he said, oh, yes, I've heard of that. And if I wanted to buy my wife a mink coat, I could do that in a heartbeat by winning that challenge. But we're not in this for the money.
No.
My student asked them, are you getting paid for this lecture? And then, brought down the house. And people started paying attention. Well, yeah. I mean, of course, they were making a good living by doing those lectures. But no, we're not in it for the money.
Let me just say this. I'm holding a glass, and I have all the self-control right now to not react to what you just said, Ken, because good God. Let me ask.
I was going to say our number 5 episode, our number 5 most downloaded episode.
Wow.
The Warren omission. Yeah.
Tell them what your number 1 downloaded episode is.
Number 1 downloaded episode is Ancient Aliens with Ken.
Ken blankety fader.
Yes.
I believe that's how it's written on Urban Dictionary. Is how that's written.
That's right. That's what the explicit parental advisory sticker on the download.
Do you just put one of them on your forehead, Ken?
Yeah, I do. Absolutely. Yeah. In my mouth, actually. I stick my tongue out.
That's
it's really...
Ken, that's a little much information. Really?
It's funny that Ken finally joined Twitter when he did, and he joined it with the Twitter handle of, I think it's like Ancient America 50 or 50 Ancient America or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
But it was really funny because long before you joined, Twitter was eager for you to join, so we had already decided that your Twitter handle was going to have to be goddamn Kenny Fader. And like,
that's funny.
When you joined with that Ancient America,
Kenny effin' Feder.
That's
I believe
right.
That
it was.
Handle.
Yes, but yeah. So
was it already taken?
The singer Amanda Palmer already says she's Amanda fucking Palmer.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's right.
Why do you know who
let's
Amanda
get back
Palmer
on
is?
haunted objects. We got a couple of North American archaeology types here. We are all aware of the social media of archaeologists digging up creepy dolls. Are we aware of this?
There's a whole
tell me more about
that.
y'all's experience with that.
I don't have any direct experience with that at all, other than people kind of asking me, well, this stuff that's creepy as fuck. That stuff that you dig up. Do you ever worry about the spirits? And I said, well, no, actually. My usual bullshit answer to that is, well, obviously, if there are spirits, they brought me to this site and they wanted me to dig this stuff up. And then people usually go
Baal's will. It's Baal's will.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's gonna win us.
But now, in Mesoamerica, Jeb,
yes.
is there a tradition of spooky dolls that the Aztecs or the Maya or whoever made, and that those spirits inhabit those and evil?
there's modern things where people put dolls, but they don't mean it to be spooky. And this is why I bring it up. I actually kind of have, and I don't want to alienate people, but it's what I'm really good at.
Alienate.
Yes. Well, I kind of do it modern too. I kind of do it post. But I actually, in all seriousness, have a problem with these sort of creepy doll concepts because, like, look, these are objects which have been made weird and exotic by time. These were things that people really cared about. These were beloved things.
Okay.
And because they look human and because they look, I get why people find them creepy, but at the same time, I'm like, don't exoticize.
No, here.
I can't tell if you're talking about dolls or great grandmothers. What?
I want to jump in here though, because you and I briefly touched on this last time we talked, and you were sober. But
so we're going to do this straight. That was never an actual state. But continue.
But no, the thing about the creepy dolls is because you guys know I do a lot of CRM, and for people who don't know, that's contract archaeology. I go out and I walk in lines in the woods. Which means you dig the
hell out of things.
I Swiss cheese the hell out of stuff. But part of it is getting to the sites and walking through the woods, and a lot of the woods is woods behind people's houses. And the reason why the creepy doll thing exists and why I'm challenging the whole statement of, it's an exoticized item is, I have seen people who have taken the dolls specifically for the purpose of creating a creepy space, like nailing them through the head to a tree, or the doll graveyard.
That I'm okay with being creepy.
Yeah, I mean,
right.
And when you're walking through the woods and you have a vague idea of where you are, and you're going off of a compass and a topo map, and you come across a graveyard where it's just all these little doll heads and doll arms sticking up out of the ground, I mean, you can't tell me that was done out of love, because that's fucking weird.
It sounds like me as a kid. I didn't like Barbie dolls. I was more of a tomboy. So if I got dolls, I'd kind of do that to them.
Right. No, I have seen a really great picture of a doll that apparently got hooked in a tree somehow, and it had been turned into a wasp's nest. The wasps have inhabited it. But it's just its head and its arms, and then its whole body is a wasp nest. It's a cool picture. I've seen it and I love it, and I know it's a field picture, but I mean, that I would agree with you, that's an out of place object that got turned into something creepy. But I have seen dolls used as creepy.
I have two reactions to that. One, I'm going to now tape up all the ducks in my house for the wasps. And secondly, that kind of feels very Mary Douglas, because what you're describing are things that are out of place.
Right.
They are weird because they're out of place.
Right.
And the thing I get bothered by is these and this gets into our haunted objects thing, I think, things that make sense where they are discarded by people, but because of time and because of where, and because, frankly, we are weirded out by seeing the human form outside of us, they become creepy. And it's like, look, you dug up a Victorian doll. It's not creepy because it's a different context.
No, I agree with you there. I agree with you there.
But if somebody Mary Douglases the shit out of that and nails it to a tree because they want you to feel weird,
right?
Success.
But also, if it's a baby doll, it's creepy. But if it's a Barbie doll, miso hornet.
Oh my god!
It took a second, but we got it.
Wow.
There.
I'm totally editing that out. That's done.
That's not the first time you'll say
the hornet thing. The hornet thing is really creepy.
All right, so before. Go ahead,
Ken.
I saw on Twitter a doll said that a hermit crab had moved into and
using
it as a child.
Awesome.
That's pretty messed up.
I love that.
I like that a lot.
What about that toy that was filled with the beans and it sprouted?
I haven't seen that.
That's cool, sure.
I haven't seen that, and I don't want to see that.
That sounds awesome, though.
I can't strip it out of my brain.
You kind of want to?
So
it was a doll, so it was like a human being.
Oh my god,
that's just
wow. Okay, I'm just gonna say this: having met Blake at CryptidCon, if you all think this is a thing he does for the radio?
No.
Oh no, my friend.
Oh my God, you are
It's the real
mistaken.
deal.
You know what I think the worst
is
part of it is if you follow him on Twitter, I almost
talented.
feel like it's like his testing ground for these things on Twitter, and he's like, yeah, that one went over. I'm using that on air.
Typical puns.
I'm pretty sure the world is his testing ground. So, in case we have any listeners left,
Right, exactly.
Any sober listeners?
No, yeah.
No, we want those because I mean they're already in a place to buy all the pickup trucks we're selling. But no, we wanted to talk about haunted objects tonight for Halloween, and you know what? Halloween should be full of mirth because of course it is the time when the veil between the worlds is thinnest, and that's when you should be Jesus Christ. Oh my God, no! I'm laughing and whistling against the graveyard.
Right.
But we want to talk about haunted objects, and I think this fits nicely into monsters, which we did with fairies, and I also think it fits nicely into the archaeology we do. Do we all have? I have some ideas about one, but do we have any particular haunted objects we wanted to talk about before we get into some of what we were planning on talking about?
Well, did we the moving statue of Neb-Sinu?
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. So who knows that story?
I could give a brief synopsis.
Blake, go ahead.
It was noted that
this is in England. Is it? Where is it? Do you remember?
Right in Manchester, England. There's a statue of it's an Egyptian statue of Neb-Sinu, and what was noticed, I guess there were security cameras on it.
Hang on. Which one's Neb-Sinu? Which one's Neb-Sinu?
Neb-Sinu, Manchester moving statue. There's been TV shows and whatnot.
Right. But we have to pretend like we don't know what we're talking about. So we've got
Egyptian.
Egyptian
right. It's Egyptian.
Who was Neb-Sinu?
Who? Oh, I don't know that.
No.
You guys know that.
And we have now hit the limit.
Oh.
Yeah.
We'll call him some minor functionary who was
Egyptian statue. Let's
it's
just
a 3,800-year-old statue. I know that much.
Okay.
So basically
right,
Middle Kingdom. All right.
Middle Kingdom statue.
And it was obviously looted by the Brits because that's what they do.
That's what they do.
Hey now.
God bless them. God
now.
Bless them.
So it's the statues in a glass display, and on security cameras, it was noticed that the statue was moving on its own and rotating.
Turning, right?
Rotating,
Right, it was turning.
rotating.
It was like rotating. Yeah.
Yes, it is sitting and spinning.
Right, exactly.
Slowly.
And so over
No
time.
one, really? Okay. Anyway.
Yeah, no, it was. I'm old enough to remember the sit and spin.
I was going somewhere else with that, but anyway, yes.
So it's sitting and spinning in a glass case. It's legitimately happening. You wouldn't notice it if you're watching it because it's very slow.
It's really goddamn slow.
Right. But there was investigation, and the skeptical explanation is that vibration from local traffic was causing it to slowly rotate in the glass. And I mean slowly.
Like over the course of a day.
Yeah. And so you'd come in, you wouldn't notice it if you were there, but over the course of a day, it actually did like a 360. So, and thus was haunted for at least a couple of days till they figured out what was going on.
Except for a couple of days, you mean like apparently they're still doing that. There was some show that I forget the name of it, but Sharon pointed out where there's some recent, I think it's like the Science Channel, Discovery Channel, where it was their first episode in 2017. This was like 5 years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a while back.
Something like that. So, I mean, apparently mysteries never die. By mysteries, I mean things we actually know. But yeah, it was literally rotating. So the real thing is, how many of us have been in houses where trucks or trains or traffic or whatever cause things to move?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Yeah, California earthquakes.
I used to live next to a quarry, and that definitely moves things when they blast.
If you put something too close to the edge of a table, you don't even feel it happening, but it's enough to knock it over the table.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Who did that?
So why were none of these things haunted?
The things that in the houses that they moved.
They weren't 3,800 years old, Jeb. That's why.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And perhaps more important. Yes, Karen.
Maybe they. No, that was me, Sarah.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
We sound the same. Absolutely the same.
Yep. I can't
Very
tell.
much.
Oh my God, what's going on?
Sarah, say wallaby. Sarah, say wallaby. So anyway, But go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, how do you know it's not a house full of haunted objects and they're just reacting to the noise of the cars, the trucks?
They hate these trains.
Yeah, and they hate the trains so much that they're moving because they're agitated by the noise.
So, now that does fall into Occam's razor. I think that's appropriate.
Yes.
But
when the moving rocks of Death Valley. Were
Right.
those ever assumed to be haunted, or was that always kind of, well, we know there's a natural explanation, we just don't know what it is yet?
I always figured it was the latter. I mean, people mentioned it because it was weird, but I don't think anybody literally was like, these are effing ghosts, or these are effing jinn, or effing aliens, or whatever else.
I think I heard the theory though that they were the aliens were moving the rocks, or it could have been ghosts or something like that.
Those are the worst aliens ever.
They're the scariest aliens ever. All they do is
pointless
rearrange.
aliens.
Yeah. But I guess the thing with haunted objects is that haunted objects are usually also stolen objects. They are usually objects that have lost their past.
Exactly.
They're a legitimate past, and they often have had one imposed upon them. And that is, I think, possibly a place that we can pick this up. I think we're around our first break. We have a break in ours.
We still got a few. Keep going.
Okay.
Okay, well, can I say something about
Yes,
this?
absolutely. Yes.
Have any of you guys seen The Haunted Collector on TV? I'm not sure which channel shows it. But
it's been a while, but I have seen a couple episodes.
What's the guy's name?
Zach Baggins.
Join Zaffis.
Well, there's Zaffis
Zaffis
is the one I know. Yeah, Zach Baggins.
Yeah, so
Zach
he's-
Baggins has a new museum in Las Vegas. That's what I'm thinking.
With his,
is it in Las Vegas?
with his
I thought it was
precious.
in Connecticut. I thought
No,
it was.
Zaffis is Connecticut. Baggins is Las Vegas.
Yeah. So
right.
So Karen, you're bringing up the Haunted Collector.
Yeah, yes. John Zaffis is actually Ed Warren's nephew.
Yes.
So for those who don't know, and so this TV show is basically the premise is that he and his team, and I think it involves a few members of his family, they go to people's houses where there are claims that they're having paranormal activity of some kind, and usually it's something ominous as well. It's just not. It's just there's something very bad going on there.
Everything is always demonic. Everything.
It is, and they really do start with that whole premise about objects being possessed. And so what they do is the team goes into a house and they locate and then remove any haunted or possessed objects. And it's very interesting to me too, because typically the cameras start scanning around the house and you think, oh, okay, that creepy doll or that clown there, that's going to be the haunted object. But no, these guys are professionals. They know what they're doing. It ends up being something like a smoking pipe or a sword, something unexpected. It's not usually the creepy thing in the house.
It's like the Haunted Antique Roadshow. That's so weird.
And they also
so John Zappis and his crew. Sorry?
No, I was just going to ask, how valuable are these objects that end up being haunted?
Well, some of them are quite valuable, and he basically takes these objects
does he say, like, now this is so dangerous, I'll take it?
He does. He very kindly relieves them of their antiques and other things.
How did I not think of this?
I know, it's genius.
It's like that. It's like the old Friday the 13th TV show.
Oh yeah.
Except they never solved the case. You just come see you pay to see it.
Can you go to somebody's house and simply say, all those bills in your billfold, that money, that's haunted.
You've got a TV show. You've got a TV crew.
Ken, that's actually like a really common mystic
routine
where you tell people to burn off a curse, you need to get rid of the money.
Yeah. I'll take it off your hands.
No.
And then they do the magic. They appear to burn the cash, and they actually pocket it.
There was actually, I read about this. There was actually a rash of cons that were going on, and apparently they were targeting elderly Asian women with this because apparently if they're immigrants, they still have that. And so there were people who were taking advantage of that superstition, and they were like targeting these women on the streets, and they're like, oh yeah, there's a curse, and if you bring me a sealed packet of $300, then I can cleanse the curse from you. And they would do it, and they had a bad.
Oh my God, they turned it to the billet swap. Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Nicely done.
I've got some insider info on this show. that I think you guys might appreciate, the listeners might appreciate. Yeah.
There's your pre-break teaser. Nicely done, Sarah.
You want to go back after this?
Yes.
After the
break, all of the inside information.
Stick around.
This network is supported by our listeners. You can become a supporting member by going to arcpodnet.com/members and signing up. As a supporting member, you have access to high-quality downloads of each show and a discount at our future online store, and access to show hosts on a members-only Slack team. For professional members, we'll have training shows and other special content offered throughout the year. Once again, go to arcpodnet.com/members to support the network and get some great extras and swag in the process. That's arcpodnet.com/members.
And we are back, and Karen, you took us out with an interesting behind-the-scenes trivia bit. What have you got for us?
With the Haunted Collector. The Haunted Collector.
The Haunted Collector with John Zaffis. So this is a little bit of goss that I've got behind the scenes.
Oh,
so a friend of mine who is a well-known magician whose name I cannot mention, unfortunately, told me personally that the producers of the show once contacted him and they said, we need you to make some special effects for the show.
My God.
Unbeknownst to the actors, the producers wanted to scare the actors in the show.
Okay, that's kind of awesome.
This is way better than the actors doing something to pretend to be.
No. That's like kind of a whole other level. That's amazing.
Well, something similar is I don't know if you guys have heard of Fact or Faked. I'm sure you have. I know Blake certainly has.
It was a show on the Sci-Fi Channel. Yes.
Yeah, I don't think it's on anymore. But it was basically where they'd just take apparently random, I think, videos from YouTube.
From YouTube, yeah.
And so paranormal videos, and they would try to recreate whatever phenomena was taking place and to decide in the end whether it was fact or faked. And so the producers of that show went to my husband, who happens to do the same sort of thing as me, skeptical paranormal research.
All right.
And he had a video, it was a promo for a TV show that he was doing at the time. And there was a Ouija board and the planchette leapt across the Ouija board.
Oh, dear
and
God.
so they wanted to use this video, and the producers got in contact with him and they said, look, we'll give you $1,500 if you can make the jump of the planchette more pronounced.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
So I actually wrote about this for the James Randi Educational Foundation and for Skeptical Inquirer. So the information's out there on the web. So I'll supply that for the show notes too. But this just seems to be. I've unfortunately had a lot of experience with producers and TV shows, and this sort of thing is common.
We get a lot of contact for people wanting to have us on as skeptics on their TV shows, and it's always the same sort of thing. We need to pit the skeptics versus the believers, or you're on a team and one of you is a believer and one of you is a skeptic or two or whatever.
If we can get some kind of Mulder-Scully dynamic.
They
Well,
want that conflict because they think it's interesting. They think it heightens the drama to have two people sniping at each other.
Because
at
characters
TV.
and conflict, and you're both interesting characters, and
They just want us to come on and say no. Really,
well, there's that too.
Skeptic.
I have actually had producers say flat out to me that when I tell them I'm not interested in that, that's a bunch of crap. They say, yes, but you get to play the archaeologist. It's like, this is a reality program.
Well, that's so alluring.
turns out I actually have a fucking degree in that. Just saying.
It's worth remembering where all this stuff comes out of the fact that the Writers Guild of America had a strike, and the way to fill that time was to come up with this sort of concept of reality programming, which is just film a whole bunch of crap and have the producers edit it down to tell the story they want to tell.
Absolutely.
So what I'm hearing is if you remove all gatekeepers, just y'all fill that with whatever you want to fill that with.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So now I've got a question for you, Karen. So this show is the notion behind this that these objects are pissed off that they're in somebody's house because they're haunted and they want to be taken back to where they belong?
Seems like there's an obvious solution to that.
That's an interesting theory, but I think it depends on the object that we're talking about. So often their theory for the show is that people have picked up antiques, secondhand objects, and that they still carry the memory of or that they're haunted in some way, and they might be haunted by spirits or the object itself. And that once so sometimes it might want to go back to the owners, but usually it just needs to be, I think, taken out of the household so that the paranormal activity stops and that everyone's safe. And then John Zaffis has his museum and I guess can make money out of it.
So kind of like in the old medieval concept of laying a ghost, and that has been sort of carried forward. There's the fiction of M.R. James, where like most of his stories are about a haunted object here, a haunted object there, that just needs to be sort of neutralized.
So we
over.
He takes it and he's just isolating them like Annabelle. He's keeping these things behind glass doors. And so I don't know. I think that he thinks too somehow that he can just protect himself and people from these objects.
I find it interesting that a glass case is all you.
Well, and spells, I guess.
Sorry, Sarah.
Prayers.
No, it's cool.
Sarah found it interesting in a glass case. What?
We've been having a few cut-ins and cut-outs.
Yeah. I was gonna say the audio is actually getting a little choppy.
So I was gonna jump in that we've mentioned this on this show. That the National Park Service uses a version of this to actually prevent people or to dissuade from stealing pieces of petrified wood from the petrified forest.
And also in Hawaii,
Hawaii, right? Volcanic rock.
There's actually a book now that compiles the letters that people have sent the Park Service by people saying, returning, years later sometimes, returning pieces of petrified wood that they illegally picked up in the petrified forest and asking that they be forgiven because their lives have become pure shit since they picked up that piece of wood. So there's some curse or something haunted about those pieces that, oh my God, if you put it back, they even tell the Park Service in some of these letters, this is where I picked it up. Please put it back in the same place so that the curse will be removed from me.
That's how I feel about my dissertation. But
haunted petrified wood.
Don't tell me that.
Haunted petrified wood. You'll never get bored with it.
Isn't that an episode of the?
We need somebody to doing rim shots on a snare drum in the background.
Oh God!
I don't think there are enough snare drums. Yeah, but that reminds me of the scare gifts. So a book again. I love promoting this book because it's not mine. Roger Luckhurst, the Mummy's Curse, the history of a dark fantasy. He talks about the idea of sort of the origin of haunted objects, and he talks about how every time one of these things gets promoted, there are all these scare gifts of people like sending shit back to the British Museum or other places for the exact same reason. Like, oh my God, no. And the one he talks about is the unlucky mummy. Now I know we've talked about
the
that.
Unlucky Mummy, yeah.
Yeah, Blake and Karen, do you know the Unlucky Mummy? Have you heard that? Have you heard of this?
I'm assuming this is not Tut. So some other
before, yeah.
So no, I don't think so.
No, don't me.
It's a mummy case. It's from much later in Egyptian history, like a later dynasty. But it became very much associated. It's really in many ways the origin of the idea of the mummy's curse and people that get injured and die around it. And one of them was a reporter. I want to say Bertram. I'd have to go back and look up his name. I'm screwing this up now. But
I'll link us all this stuff in the show notes again.
That was a good friend of Arthur Conan Doyle.
Right.
And when he died at an unexpected age, Doyle blamed elementals because Doyle had sort of dallied with the supernatural and the occult and spiritualism before he went kind of full-throated on it. This is the same guy that also inspired the Hound of the Baskervilles. He had sort of collected lore about Dartmoor black dogs, and when Doyle visited him, literally the guy that drove him to his Dartmoor house was named Baskerville. And so this was sort of that individual. When this got returned to or sort of mentioned in the press, people sent in droves the shit that they had been stealing from Egypt and other places to the British Museum in the same way that people send stuff back to Hawaii or they send stuff back to the petrified forest. This is not a new concept.
Did you guys ever see the episode, and I'm ashamed to say this, but of the Brady Bunch?
Oh, yes, the tiki
The
doll.
tiki doll. Yeah.
And the tarantula.
Someone had to say it, Ken.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, this is one of the beautiful things. These ideas still make sense to people for very good reasons.
Yeah,
they fit into very specific ideas. I mean, it's not like that thing came from Pennsylvania. As much as we're talking about the length and or breadth of Pennsylvania, these things come from Hawaii.
Exotic places.
From exotic places where a president clearly could never come from. Fuck the 21st century.
Poor Greg being involved in that surfing accident.
Yes, exactly.
They had Vincent Price in it. That man must have needed to pay the rent.
Oh, so do we all know that Vincent Price was an artifact collector?
No, I
He was
did
an
not.
art collector. I didn't know he was an artifact collector.
You know,
If you go,
that fits with the whole Vincent Price image, though. Really.
So we've had Donnie Yates on our show, who's an expert in international antiquities crime and international antiquities legislation and laws and regulations and so forth. We've had her on before, and she is one of the brains behind the fantastic site Trafficking Culture. And on there, you can find discussion, as well as on her anonymous Swiss collector blog, which talks about this, of Vincent Price, who, was a spooky actor and blah, blah, blah. Also Thriller, Stranger Things is coming out next week, whatevs. But he also kind of sold himself as a sophisticated person. He was like, he sold cookbooks, not spooky cookbooks, just cookbooks. Like he was like, I do these things. And part of that was he collected Zapotec urns in his house, and that was sort of part of his image as a sophisticated person, which is kind of fascinating.
Right. Towards the end of his life, he did a lot of talk show stuff, and he was presented just as this extremely sophisticated, urbane individual with lots and lots of interests beyond being this actor who was in all these horror movies.
He was an interesting guy, and as a horror fan, I love his work. I recently learned that his daughter did a book in where she claimed he was bisexual, which I thought, well, I mean, I don't think that's as important now as it, it's not quite that shocking of a revelation, but regardless, it's like he was such a metrosexual character, regardless of that. Like his interests were so culturally broad. He was involved in so many things. His work promoted the work of Poe. His work promoted the work of so many different artists, and like so many of his movies, while they're kind of like high camp, they tie into so many cool literary tropes and stuff. I just love Price.
No.
So
wasn't he wonderful in Edward Scissorhands?
Yes, he was. Sorry, Sarah.
Wonderful, yeah.
Well, I know Jeb's seen it, but have you guys watched the Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated cartoon series that ran, I want to say 3 to 4 years ago now?
We talked about it with the Zechariah Sitchin tie-in.
Chargar Gothicon. Yes.
They've got a Vincent Price character on there. I forget his last name's Van Gould, and I forget what his first name is. But the guy that's doing his voice is just kind of spot on. Actually, I mean, you can tell it's not Vincent Price, but he's pretty dang good about it. But it's just interesting how they've interpreted Vincent Price's spooky persona into the Van Gould character, because the Van Gould character it's Vincent Price, and so of course he's the star of all of these super campy, goofy movies that the Scooby Gang watches. But then when they pull him out, he's also this, like, he's a thespian, and he's like trying to make the greatest play ever, and he's like he's also like an insecure character. I mean, like, he's not like, insecure is the wrong way to put it, but they really made him have depth, which is interesting for a kid's cartoon that they even went that far. But I think it's because they're portraying him. I mean, it's supposed to be Vincent Price, and I think people have, especially people in the horror genre, have such a love for him.
Oh yeah.
Well, I'm going to name drop now, and get ready. So Victoria Price came out to Denver. She went to it was Starfest, Horror Fest here a couple of years ago. And for some reason, she became friendly with my husband and some of his colleagues. And so we actually went out to dinner with her, which was nice. A fascinating experience. We went to a restaurant called Linger, which used to be a former mortuary.
Nice.
In Denver.
Whoa.
So she absolutely loved this place, and we got a free meal out of it because the owner found out that she was Victoria Price and pretty much sat with us for the entire meal.
Any free meal story is a great story.
Please tell me that they recycled the ovens in which they cremated human remains and they made them pizza or something.
Oven-fired pizza. And by ovens, we mean ovens. No, I was like, I went to school at the University of Pittsburgh, and a year or two after I graduated, I visited. I went back and visited, and I ended up watching in Pittsburgh Night of the Living Dead with the son of one of the people from Night of the Living Dead.
Wow.
Nice.
This is all Romero. This is all Romero country. And we're literally watching this, and like at the bottom, because they made it very real, there's all the like, if you are in trouble, go to, and they were naming like hospitals like three minutes away and like 2 minutes away. And I'm like, this got really, really weird. It's like, oh yeah, no. The hot girl and the guy who get like burned at the gas station when they go to the gas pump, that's my dad and my mom. Because they were producers. They were producers of the show. So let me ask you all. So we are both archaeology fantasy, because of course we're talking about Vincent Price, so you know we're doing that, and we're also doing Monster Talk. In all the monsters you can think of, in all the monsters you've dealt with, and preferably more the ones people actually believe in, not so much the Black Lagoon / creature, but enough about Evansville. Are there objects? Are there idols? Are there other things you can think of that kind of get tied, or images or objects or the archaeological, into any of the sort of the monsters you've covered so far? You can sort of think of them when I talk about haunted objects.
Oh, that's a good question, but off the top of my head, Blake.
Oh, I keep thinking about this because you get into sort of like this religious symbology for like tying to like fighting monsters with religious artifacts or silver or these sort of pure concepts.
Werewolves. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
you've done the Beast of Gévaudan.
Yeah, and I love the fact that the Beast of Gévaudan, the silver bullet, is all my research indicates that there was no silver bullet in that story until our good friend John Keel added it in the 1970s.
Jesus Christ!
Yeah, it was not a part of the original material. It was added in the 1970s. I love that fact.
I had forgotten that's where you went. That was not theatrical. That was an actual.
That was an actual Jesus Christ.
For those of you who don't know why we did this, Blake and Sharon and I went to CryptidCon and we're working on a thing. It turns out that John Keel is the prophet of the unified field theory of the paranormal.
Or as I like to say, how John Keel keel-hauled paranormal literature,
yes,
right?
I'm pretty sure.
You'll work it out.
Well, I had to say, I think that was mine.
That is yours for sure. That's yours for sure.
No, that was mine. How John Keel hauled the paranormal.
Exactly.
I learned from you. I learned from the master. But let's. I mean, let me think. I mean, in all seriousness, we have one. I think we'd like to talk about when we take the break in a moment. The Hexam heads. But before we get to that, I'm trying to think. I mean, when we get to say Bigfoot, there is the hairy man pictograph. Which we have talked about on our cryptozoology episode, and we discussed, and I'm not gonna strain that topic. But
nicely done. I got that.
And subtle, very subtle though.
Not subtle at all. Not subtle at all. But in all seriousness, I'm not an expert on that, and we've discussed that one on the show. I'm trying to think of any others that really incorporate sort of objects. A lot of these incorporate discussions of indigenous knowledge or sort of pre-modern knowledge. Again, I think kind of telegraphing where we're going with the Hexam heads. But how many of these really get into, I guess these are discussions we're having in terms of the human material culture versus sort of whether they're considered spiritual or flesh and blood kind of cryptids and wild creatures. I mean, like, there's no idol to the Loch Ness Monster except for, today. But there is actually a statue of Champ next to Lake Champlain. I've seen it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's unfortunate because I kind of think of in terms of one of the things that I like to think of is if the monsters were real, your skeptic might be well educated enough to be the person to go to, sort of that character like the TV host in Fright Night, someone who knows the lore well enough to like tell you how to fight it. Like, I don't think they're real, but if they were, here's what you need to do. I
try to be that way. I try to be that way.
I want to be prepared, right? Exactly.
Speaking of, I want to tangent slightly because there's been no tangents in the previous part of the show. But
I'm sorry, that was.
I thought this whole episode was a tangent.
The whole thing is a tangent.
Yeah.
Have you all seen the Toyota commercial with Adrian Shine?
Yes.
No.
I saw that in class the other day. It's wonderful.
Oh my gosh, no.
Adrian Shine, for those of it, and I think we'll kind of lead out on this. Adrian Shine is the deeply bearded. I don't think that's an actual verb.
It's like ZZ
adjective.
Top versus Nessie. Yeah.
Yes. And wow. Adrian Shine in the 1970s very seriously took Nessie and also Monster in Lake Morag, or Lake Morag and Morar. I forget exactly how that goes, but was seriously cryptozoologically in the 70s looking for these creatures as flesh and blood. And he became eventually very skeptical and ended up leading things like Project Deep Scan and other more serious, and then looking for things like nematodes, like understanding the ecology of Loch Ness, that became clearly skeptical voices. And he is now sort of the head of like the Loch Ness Project and like the visitor center if you go to Drumna Drocket on the shores of Loch Ness near Urquhart Castle. And he did a commercial, I want to say probably about 10 years ago now, for Toyota, where he's giving his random talking head, blah, 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 Nessie be wonderful. And then there's a CGI Nessie flopping around in the water behind him.
Oh, yes,
and he literally runs off at full tilt to go after this thing because, oh my God, it's Nessie in the Loch. And it is highly, highly amusing.
Well, are we talking about the same one where Nessie actually picks the pickup truck up?
Yes, that's the one I've seen.
Brings it down and then throws it. And then, but the cool thing is the pickup truck, even having been brought into the lock, they start it up and drive the hell away.
Yeah. No, that's it. They did a couple other ones, but yeah, it's actually Adrian F. Shine doing this thing. And he has been more recently featured by Google and other bits. And I guess the point here is you could think about Loch Ness, it's this haunted monster, it's those things, but Urquhart Castle is in a sense the haunted object, because if any of you are going to fake a Nessie picture, you're going to have that effing castle in the background.
Right. Oh yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. For scale, if for nothing else.
So since we've gone to the British Isles, when we come back, I think we should talk about spectral werewolves. I think that's a thing we should do.
I think the Weresheet Man is far more important.
The Weresheet Man.
The Weresheet Man. I
think that's where we're leading this sewing discussion.
All right. Well, let's go to break, and when we come back, we will start in on Weresheet Man.
Stay cool and choose from over 40 in-stock ceiling fans for under $100, plus an 11% rebate at Menards. We carry the largest selection of in-stock Hunter ceiling fans, available in a variety of designs, finishes, and features. Create the perfect look and lighting for any room with a new Hunter ceiling fan. Visit Menards.com and view our entire selection of Hunter ceiling fans, plus the weekly flyer and other great deals going on now.
Save big money at Menards.
Interested in archaeology? Want to hear from experts in the field about the latest discoveries and interpretations? Check out the Archaeology Show every other Saturday and let hosts Chris Webster and April Camp Whitaker take you deeper into the story. Check out the Archaeology Show at www.archpodnet.com/archaeology and subscribe, rate, and comment on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and the Google Music Store. That's www.archpodnet.com/archaeology. Now back to the show.
And we are back, and we want to move on to a I think more people know what these artifacts are than some of the other things we've talked about, but the Hexam heads, which are
Well, I mean... Mm-hmm.
And people know what these are because they listen to our podcast and they
yes,
read
we did
my
a show
blog.
on these.
Yes. So
Jeb, what are the
Jeb, tell us about these and why we keep going on about were-sheep men and spectral werewolves.
Because were-sheep man's amazing.
That is true.
So we did a whole show on the Hexam heads, which are dug up out of a garden in council housing in Hexham in Northumberland in northern England in 1971. And this is a thing that if you go into, let's conjure up various adjectives we won't actually use, but spectral places are fairly infamous for being ridiculously haunted objects. These objects are again discovered in 1971, and they are very quickly nominated as Celtic in origin. And again, if you've heard us discuss this, the very concept of Celtic doesn't mean that they're not Celtic languages, not to mean there's a Celtic fringe, but that word, in no small part due to colonial relations that go to the 19th and earlier centuries, has a lot of exoticness built in. You know, if I go looking for things with Celtic online, I'm sure there'll be images of Stonehenge and other very mystical images that will come out of that, even though those don't necessarily have anything to do with these things.
Right.
So these two little, I believe, Sarah, you described them as looking not unlike apple dolls.
They do. They look like, the pictures that I've seen of them, they look like, if anyone's ever seen an apple doll where you take an apple and you peel the skin off of it and then you carve a face into it and you let it shrivel up and dry. They're terrifying. But they're really kind of cool, and that's exactly what these Hexam head things look like. Yeah. And I think there's a reason for
Except
that.
they're made, well, they look like they're made of stone. Well, we'll get to that.
Right.
But they look like little apple dolls, and the reason you know what they look like is you've seen pointillist drawings, which of course means that they have been properly recorded by archaeologists, which they were. Well, because they were taken as Celtic in origin when they were discovered, and they went through a number of hands. And Paul Screeton, who is something of a believer in ley lines and other sorts of issues, has written the sort of definitive book on the Hexam heads, and has also made a documentary which I believe is literally called Heads! !
That makes it.
Yes.
It's the exclamation mark.
Jeb, in your opinion, are they Celtic?
Oh, we'll get to that. We'll get to that.
And are they stone?
Oh my God.
So are they stone or are they Celtic? Answer, narrative pause. But so these things end up in the hands of archaeologist Anne Ross, who is actually quite very much an expert on Celtic things in the late 1960s, early 1970s, well respected. And she puts them in with a larger collection of quote unquote Celtic heads that she has been collecting. The problem is that once she does this, she gets haunted by spectral werewolves.
Oh,
so
as happens.
As one does. As one does.
Yeah.
Well,
so
It's an occupational hazard.
Well, okay, but you left out all of the haunting that happened before
Yes.
she got hold of them, though.
I left out, but I was going back to. So
Sorry,
in Hexam itself, proper. No. You're not wrong to question my narrative because it really wasn't a very strong narrative. But no, in Hexam proper, the people that find it don't have any real problems. But their neighbors get haunted in the middle of the night by what can be very delicately called were-sheep man.
Yeah.
Half man, half sheep, all were.
Do we know the ramifications?
Oh man, Blake, that was good.
Nice.
Oh, that slipped on by. I missed that.
I was gonna say fuck you.
Now, in more seriousness, the description of the
vellum, in my opinion.
Too late for this.
You know when Jeb is the voice of maturity.
Things have gone horribly wrong. But to be in all wow, okay, that's fair though. In all seriousness, when we say were-sheep man, we're describing something it was described as the head of a man, the upper body of a man, lower body of a sheep, which sounds kind of demonic. The neighbor sort of described a nocturnal assault, to which I would say, go look at sleep paralysis. But anyway, but they wanted to move out of the house, and the sort of idea that these two stone Celtic heads that had been dug out of the earth in Northumberland in 1971 had spread. And Ross, the archaeologist in another part of the country, then starts describing that she, even though she had been obsessed with werewolves the early part of her life, is seeing spectral werewolves in her house. Which Sarah, when we covered this, people seem to love the fact that you were baffled by the fact that they were okay with this. That Anne Ross and her family were describing. Go ahead.
You're missing the, when we did this the first time, we explained that the family would see these giant werewolf-esque manifestations and just go, oh, okay, and just keep going on with their daily life. I think at one point there was a giant werewolf manifestation at the top of the staircase, and the daughter was taking food up to somebody, or she was carrying something
to her father.
Right. And she was just like, do, oh, hey, giant werewolf guy, do, and just kept on her going. I'm just like, but there's a giant
they are
werewolf.
British. I mean, they're British.
That's so British. Can you imagine her walking by going, morning?
Yeah.
Exactly.
My husband's had that kind of thing where his ghost hunting group have been called around to people's houses, and they call it 3 a.m. and you've got to come around, and we've got spinning heads and all kinds of crazy things taking place. So you've got to save us. And so, okay, we'll come straight around now. Oh no, you can't, because I've got a hairdressing appointment, or I'll get my nails done. And so, can you come around in two weeks from Tuesday?
Oh my God.
Well,
that seems eminently proper.
I don't fully understand how council housing works, but I believe the rent is low, so there is an offset, right? So,
well, but you're sort of trapped in it, and so they actually requested, we want out, and they actually got it. And the official reason was, the house is too small. But it seemed apparently in context to be also you don't want to live there because of spectral were-sheep man.
Right.
An afterthought.
So these two Celtic, and I know this is audio, but Celtic air quotes.
Air quotes. Yeah.
Heads had been studied by an archaeologist, and they had actually been drawn and recorded and all that as they were real. And again, Ross was studying these very seriously, and you can go look up her books on this. However, when this got a hell of a lot of attention because of were-sheep man and spectral werewolves in the press, sheer terror, shearing terror, all the shearing terror.
No, stop.
In
1971,
1972, this got a little more attention. And at one point, Desmond Craigie, a local man who had worked in construction, said, excuse me, I lived in that house, and I decided to make doll heads for my children, which is maybe why they look like apple dolls, out of the concrete concretions that I had been making. And at the same time, Ross had sent the heads, these alleged 2,500-year-old Celtic heads, for elemental or compositional analysis, basically taking slices off, looking at them under petrography, other sources, other analyses. The first one was these look legit for various reasons. The second analysis that came out basically around the same time as Craigie going, I can absolutely say I made these, and then he promptly made some in his kitchen sink, was yeah, these are concrete.
Oh, all right.
So we have concrete evidence.
We have concrete evidence.
Okay.
But in essence, these things that had allegedly whistled up a were-sheep man and or a demon, if you want to see it that way, and spectral werewolves and bad luck and car crashes and other things. Again, you can look at sort of the literature on this. Nonetheless, had very serious, strong, concrete evidence that they had been made 15 years earlier out of concrete.
Where are they now? I mean, I understand this happened in the 70s, but what have they done for us ungulately?
No one knows.
Stop,
and I see what you did there.
No, don't encourage it. Jeez.
Don't make eye contact.
I see what you did there. I can't make eye contact, no camera. But the actual
metaphorically,
nothing's metaphorical. But the actual disposition of them is actually not known, and that would be fascinating to know. But they were fairly decently studied in the 1970s. They got in the hand of Don Robbins, who was a big fan of stone tape theory and similar ideas in the 1980s, which is the idea that objects sort of record ancient electromagnetic memories and replay them sort of like ghost recordings, which has kind of given way to quantum entanglement in the 21st century because it's a terrible place. But we don't know where the actual ones went and whether Don Robbins has them or others. This is something that Screeton actually discusses in his sort of, again, definitive book on the Hexam Heads. And I think it's In Quest of the Hexam Heads, if I remember correctly. We can find that.
We'll put the link in the show notes.
Yeah. But this is the fascinating part. The unlucky mummy case I mentioned earlier has no actual curse. That's entirely a Victorian thing. The Hexam Heads are from the 1950s. They have no purchase on antiquity.
Right.
Indian burial ground curses, native burial ground curses, that's basically about 100 years old. The idea of indigenous curses on European settlers is a bit older, but that's largely a European sort of guilt/colonial fantasy. These things all have to do with modern society and basically wanting to re-enchant the landscape, not to Weber the shit out of this. That's the thing I find fascinating about haunted objects. This is the thing I find fascinating about Robert the Doll. Robert the Doll is just a goddamn doll.
Creepy looking doll.
Sure. But nonetheless.
Right. Well,
yes, go ahead.
We talked about that briefly in the Robert the Doll episode that we did, where, any curse story has this sort of built-in success rate, because what you're doing is you're doing this filtering where you say, okay, every bad thing that happens to me, I can attribute it to Robert the Doll. So you start to think about what bad things have happened since you encountered Robert the Doll, and then any bad thing you start to think of, oh, it fits. Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
So
well, when you go there as well, you've got the communal reinforcement with people, thousands of people who've written in these letters apologizing to him for having taken a picture without his permission. And
exactly. Yeah, so I agree, and we talked about that a little bit in a Robert the Doll episode. So I think curse-based sort of approaches to this view, that fits totally into the sort of cognitive bias which we're born to. This is how our brains work. We're looking for explanations for stuff, right. and it's so easy to fall into the curse mentality. Yeah. And I feel like as a skeptic, I hope I'm a sort of somewhat immune to the sort of that sort of thinking, but it's a really human way to approach this stuff. You're looking for explanations. Curses are perfectly good, right? Patterns are there. The patterns.
Apophenia is a hell of a drug.
It really is, and the whole goal of Monster Talk is to sort of approach this with. Here's let us explain that biases can make things look really plausible, and let us explain that there's really good reasons why it can seem real, but it won't hold up in a real, sort of clinical approach. And learning critical thinking skills can save you money as well as alleviate fear, which is true. I love feeling spooky. I love spooky stories, and apparently I love whiskey. But
one of these things did not need to be admitted to.
Interestingly, they're going to be releasing the last bit of what the Kennedy papers is that next week. And I've heard the
thanks to Congress
that people who embrace these conspiracy theories they don't want to believe that this asshole got a lucky shot off that day. They'd much rather believe there's this enormous conspiracy involving communists and fascists and Fidel Castro and the U.S. government, because that makes sense. Because although it's terrible, there's a sense to it rather than, well, sometimes a guy gets off a lucky shot.
Yeah, Steve Novella talks about. I was going to say Steve Novella talks about that a lot on the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, where it's the idea that this is such a big concept. It doesn't seem right that someone so small could take out such a big character, right? Like there's the imbalance thing.
I'm going to disagree with this, though. That seems to be very much a NPR New York Times perspective. And I'm not joking. Like, the world should make sense because I'm in a place where it makes sense. I think a lot of conspiracy theory is very much coming from a place of disassociation and not being tied to the movers and shakers or the perceived movers and shakers of a society. And most of the sort of description of that idea of like, oh, it adds order to an orderless universe. Like at least somebody's in charge, even if it's the evil Illuminati. That kind of comes from people that expect to be in charge. And this is probably not that we've had tangents in the last hour.
I don't completely agree with that idea because I think some of the people. I mean, I agree that the conspiracy theory itself is empowering to the individual who has it, but I don't think it's in a way of them trying to become the mover and shaker. I think it's more of a attempt to control what they don't understand or for some people, things just don't make sense. And so they have to come up with their own theories about it, and that gives them comfort, and it becomes part of their identity.
I think there's an element. I think there's an element of grievance. I think there's an element of grievance against the larger society, and I'm not going to invoke which one of us called the election.
Well, no, and I'm not disagreeing that there isn't a grievance with larger society, and I'm going to ignore you because I do not acknowledge the last election.
Well,
that's the problem. That's the problem.
I like to throw out this little reminder that everything only makes sense when you look at it at the end and look backwards, right? So we find like this is one of the big problems people have with evolution, right? Evolution is a filtering process. There's always the survivor fallacy that we can think about when we think about like how we view like any kind of filtering process. So we have this evolution filters out the things that didn't make sense, right? So we don't see things that don't make biological sense because they die at birth, right? They die before birth. But when you're left with this pattern of, oh, look at all these beautiful, amazing, complicated creatures, there has to be a designer. Yeah, one of the designers is natural selection because that allows a number of inexplicably complicated things to happen, but only the ones that are viable actually live to survive, to reproduce, right?
Blake, can I get you to grade my papers?
Why do you say that?
Oh, no reason.
Well, no, but there's an interesting tidbit to that one, though, because in the past that has been true. Like, only the viable survive, but now we've got modern medicine, and so now we are able to make the non-viable viable. And so that's, again, we're talking about biases, and we're using modern perspective to look at the past, and you can't do that.
Well, I guess the thing is that any of these conspiracy theories could be true, but you have to apply science and critical thinking to them to say, hey, how do we filter out the nonsense? Because if you're not going to filter them, they're all equally valid. And that's the everything's a valid theory is, it's a really common thing you'll hear in non-scientific shows is all these theories are equally valid. Well, they're not. Because some of them can survive the filter science.
We need to hear both sides. No,
Blake,
we don't.
You weren't there.
Yeah, and that comes up again and again. Exactly.
Yes, it does. It's like seeing the forest for the trees.
I wish I could walk.
No. I'm so glad we don't have the camera, so you can't just see me sitting here shaking my head.
Yeah, tutting.
This is definitely the most. This is the most. I've never been inebriated on a show before, but I'm having.
really wish I could say that.
I'm glad that you came on our show to be inebriated. I feel honored that you decided, you know what? I'm going to get drunk on Archaeology Fantasy.
I'm going to cut loose and have Halloween fun.
Sarah, as an archaeologist, I'm going to agree with that non-ironically.
And anybody who wants to accuse us of being unprofessional, we're not getting paid for this shit, so of course it's not professional.
My wife never listens to my shows. This will be the one my wife listens to for sure. I'm sure of it.
Yes. So
this is what you do.
So if we're nearly out, and it sounds like we probably are,
I'm just putting us all out of our misery.
Please do.
But in all seriousness, we've talked about the nature of sort of the exotic and monsters. We've talked about unlucky mummies. We've talked about Hexam heads. We've talked about Weresheet Man. We've talked about how one cannot simply examine anecdotal evidence, but because it's often selected for from afterwards. So let's ruin all of this. And you all have asked us for our favorite monsters. And I don't think we have a question in that regard in terms of like your favorite haunted objects, but let's ask that right now. Let's ask that of all of us. Let's do that right now. Like this is our sort of our Halloween episode, and we've clearly taken on the adult version of Halloween this time. But if we all had to kind of come up quickly with our sort of favorite haunted object, what would it be?
Now, again, because I'm here in Connecticut, my favorite haunted object has got to be Annabelle. The doll that Ed and Lorraine Warren.
They've got what, three movies out of that thing?
Oh, well, if you start with the Amityville Horror and then the Conjuring.
Oh, you got four. Yeah.
And you got way more than four. There's two Conjurings.
There's an Annabelle. There's Amityville Horror.
Yeah.
So So that one, I think, in terms of having a good business model, that probably is your best.
What percentage of the GDP of Connecticut is that?
It's hey, listen, they pay taxes, so I'm all for it.
Yep. All right.
God damn it, they pay my salary. I'm a state employee.
So Ken is Annabelle.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess I'll go next. And rather than just having a single object, this is something I wrote about years ago, again for the James Randi Educational Foundation, and it's more a kind of phenomenon of people selling their personal haunted objects onto eBay and Etsy and even Craigslist.
I think I know this is going, but continue.
Oh, well, yeah, I'm being kind of general here, I think. But,
I thought you were going to go with the Dybbuk box.
No, I wasn't. No, not that specifically, but that's an interesting one. Perhaps you can take that one. But just over the years, I've come across so many examples of dolls and haunted jewelry, and there's a practice of people stealing trinkets from graves.
Whoa. Oh my God, that's kind of horrifying.
Yeah,
they might take just the little mementos and things that people leave on graves for their family members. So it could be little toys, especially upsetting if it's children who've died. And then stealing those and then saying, "Oh, they're haunted," and selling them on eBay.
They're haunted now.
Because you stole it.
Is that still a thing? I mean, my understanding is that eBay at some point actually forbade the selling of occult stuff. Like you couldn't. Like there used to be a part where like you. Go ahead.
They did actually attempt to do that. They were really cracking down on the sales of paranormal objects and even things like spells and curses and prayers and amulets, talisman, all that sort of thing. So people just started finding workarounds. It was kind of like, in the early days of Napster where people would still upload music and they'd just change the spelling of the name of a song.
So these are not occult objects on sale. These are pirate occult objects on sale.
Kind of. You'll have people saying things like, "Oh, here is a doll," and I'm not saying it's haunted eBay, but other people have told me that it might be possessed, and so just using all kinds of strange paranormal disclaimers. But it is still taking place. You can still go onto Etsy and eBay and find these objects and time machines and.
Well, and There's a whole market.
You know, I'm not saying this is a haunted object, but it might be a haunted object. I'm just saying.
Yeah, well, and there's a whole market that it's just like haunted object eBay that you could go on and just sell your stuff. Because I know I've got several friends who are part of the Wiccan community, and I know that there is it's not to sell haunted objects, it's to allow them to sell the things that Etsy and eBay won't let them sell, things like spell packets and prayers and that kind of stuff. Yeah. But yeah, you get the haunted objects on there as well.
How much you want to bet somebody's already bought the domain hauntedobjects.com?
I mean, we can Google it.
As long as they're not like 3D scanning and printing them or anything. But
we're so going to talk about that, and you're going to be so angry when we do.
Email.
Oh, that's a new thing. But so Blake,
I'm gonna go with the Hope Diamond.
Oh, you took mine.
Hello,
bastard.
Now, have you seen it? Have you seen it?
Oh no, I've never seen it except on In Search Of. But it's always been a favorite sort of. Yeah, seriously.
Oh my God, you have to come to DC and see it. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful, and it really is blue. It's blue.
Oh, it looks beautiful on TV, and thankfully the Smithsonian has survived the curse and managed to stay in business. So that's good for them.
I would pay money if they had a little button where if you push it, it goes burr, 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 you know, and you're old enough, you know what that is.
I totally know what that is. Yeah. It's
a poor rendition of the In Search Of theme. Yes.
The views of expressed in the show are those of the producers and only represent a subset of the total number of possible views.
Amelia Earhart, the Loch Ness Monster.
Yep.
Yes.
With the incidental music.
Yeah, I love the incidental music. It is the best incidental music on any TV show.
Yep. I keep trying to figure out how to put a soundtrack behind us when we're talking, but I'm just like, I can never find the right music, and we just kind of go off on tangents too much for me to have. Like, I feel like at that point I need to have Monty Python music in the background. But yeah, I would love that.
I'm pretty sure we just found the perfect music. And that's not the In Search Of theme. That's my rendition of the Search Of theme.
I'm just gonna take that clip of Jeb doing that and just like work it into the background.
It's perfect.
Yeah. Do it. So who has not said theirs?
You?
Is it just me? All right.
I haven't said mine.
That's what I thought.
I picked a different
Sarah,
one.
Go ahead. What do you got?
Totally. Well, I was gonna do haunted 3D objects, but I'm really fascinated by that. Haunted 3D objects. I'm fascinated by this concept of a printed 3D object that is still somehow haunted, even though it's fucking made out of plastic.
Well, plastic never dies, so
this is true.
There's that. It'll all end up in the horrifying island of relief of plastic in the center of the Pacific.
When you 3D print these objects, do you have to print them in the same material? Like, do I have to go find like ceramic resin in order to reprint the haunted doll from hell, or do I have to find like wood filament to reprint haunted totems?
Children of the 3D corn-based polymer. That's
it really depends. So when you go into a 3D printing program, you have to set the percentage of the fill, and this, Sarah. So I think there should be, for the printing of 3D objects for your Patreon, there has to be the percentage of how much shit you're full of for the printing of this. And I'm not like pointing at anybody who's 3D printing their haunted objects, but yeah. And so the haunted objects for you, for me, I gotta say the Crystal Skull.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I didn't think of that one. Nice.
It's always pretty.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, because oh my God, they're full of crap.
That's Crystal.
They are so though.
The first two letters are the same. But they are, they have been tested by so many people now, and they are clearly the product of late Victorian, and not that we've been drinking, but now you drink for Victorian, late Victorian craftsmanship, and yet they are never going to goddamn die. They are now an icon of crazy ass bullshit archaeology, and that's not going to change. And the British Museum is like, this thing's full of shit, but we still put it on the first floor. Please come see it. And they're not the only one. And I kind of get it. I mean, they're pretty objects, but that's not why people care. There are plenty of other pretty objects, because there's just something about this idea of 20th century technology cast back into the past with all this mystical crap about them, and spies and F.A. Hedges and Mitchell Hedges and all this other garbage. But that said, I've seen his original objects, I've seen his original things, and I think that's probably my favorite.
Yeah. And if this is a drinking game, Jeff, do we have to drink Crystal Skull vodka to go along?
I have that.
Yeah, we got some upstairs.
There you go.
I have two empty bottles of it downstairs, so I don't need to anymore.
Did you feel spiritually enlightened when you drank it?
Yes.
It's filtered by diamonds.
Herkimer Diamonds.
Triple filtered by Herkimer Diamonds, which also, in case you're wondering, is kind of sort of charcoal. Just quartz crystals, aka charcoal. Yeah. No.
It was a clever marketing idea for sure.
Oh shit, yes. Yes. But all right, so we've done haunted objects in possibly our most directly and linear episode ever.
This was it was a very succinct episode, yes.
Yes, succinct.
Everyone stayed on topic. I was highly impressed.
Yes. It was like Herkimer crystal quartz clockwork. So I look forward to our next Monster Talk Archaeology Fantasies podcast crossover.
Now here's the deal. And for all the listeners of this, if you're confused at the end, listen to this backwards. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
It's everything you've heard today has been backmasked.
However, I will warn our listeners, if you listen to it backwards and you're near a Ouija board, we are not responsible for any portals to an ultra-dimensional hell opening and or your soul being sucked into it. You take that into your own hands, metaphorically speaking.
Yes. We will ask for people to sign disclaimers before you listen to it back.
Metaphorical disclaimers.
Metaphorical disclaimers. Every time.
We better put this at the start of the show then.
You're right. I just had to put a disclaimer. Warning, do not listen to this show backwards next to a Ouija board.
You may be better off with a do not listen to this show under any circumstances.
Yes, just leave it right there.
Just leave it right there.
Which makes it more forbidden. More forbidden.
Yes.
Do not listen to the next hour and 20 minutes of this show. Yes, gentlemen and ladies, thank you very much for joining me for year 2.
Great fun.
Thank you guys. Happy Halloween.
Likewise.
To everyone who has survived this long, happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween, yeah.
As one will call. No, we don't do dinosaurs.
Thanks for listening. We hope you've enjoyed it. Our music was provided by Archaeosuit Productions. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe and rate us on iTunes or Stitcher and share us wherever you use social media. You can contact us with your questions, comments, or angry email at archifantasies@gmail.com. You can follow the podcast at www.archaeologypodcastnetwork.com/archifantasies. You can follow the blog at www.archifantasies.com and get updates on Tumblr and Twitter at archifantasies. You can also look for us on Facebook. If you're looking for the show notes for this episode, go to the podcast website at www.archaeologypodcastnetwork.com/archifantasies. Thanks again for listening.
No, we don't do dinosaurs. No, we don't do dinosaurs. We don't do dinosaurs.
This show is produced by Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle and was edited by Chris Webster.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
Is your vehicle stopping like it should? Does it squeal or grind when you brake? Don't miss out on summer brake deals at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Baker's, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Baker's worth it every time. Bakers, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Stay cool and choose from over 40 in-stock ceiling fans for under $100, plus an 11% rebate at Menards. We carry the largest selection of in-stock Hunter ceiling fans, available in a variety of designs, finishes, and features. Create the perfect look and lighting for any room with a new Hunter ceiling fan. Visit Menards.com and view our entire selection of Hunter ceiling fans, plus the weekly flyer and other great deals going on now.
Save big